Welcome to my podcast, Scientist Free from Religion. This podcast has as proposal, as main idea to talk about a scientific topic, but also talk about religion. Different from the common assumption in which science and religion should be separated, here on this podcast we recognize formally that science and religion are not disconnected. Sadly, religion can be a very big threat to science. So on this podcast, the proposal is to talk about it freely, so without fear, without the illusion that they are separate topics. So we are going to cover a possible topic. And most of them will be focused on the connection between religion and science, especially to defend science. That's our goal. Our goal here is to defend science from religion and to help to make science, to spread scientific thinking, especially to defend it against religion.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a truly vital and, a really urgent set of sources today, all focused on the work of a writer publishing under the necessary pen name, New Shoes.
And it's so important to start right there with the pen name.
Right.
Because this isn't some literary device, for dramatic effect. It's a professional identity that is, well, it's adopted purely for security.
Like safety.
For safety. It shows you the real physical, personal risks involved in this discussion from the get-go. We're looking at this incredible intellectual journey of rejecting dogma, but it's all happening against a backdrop where just speaking your mind can have the highest possible cost.
And the sources New Shoes provides, they tackle two really intense themes that are woven together. First, there's this 1,400-year historical pattern.
A direct line.
A direct line tracing the origins of capital punishment for blasphemy and apostasy in Islam. And then second, we get this incredibly personal journey of trying to find a moral foundation after leaving that framework, a process New Shoes calls a midnight search.
And that's our mission for you, the learner, today. It's a dual mission, really. First, we need to understand the profound danger here, the documented historical trap that's been set. Then we pivot. We look at the strength, the evolutionary advantage of secular ethics.
And New Shoes frames this whole thing through a very specific lens.
Yes. As an ex-Muslim scientist, this isn't just a theological debate. It's being filtered through science, through rational inquiry, which is, the entire focus of the platform where some of this work is published. Scientists free from religion.
That's a key point. It shifts the whole conversation away from pure theology and towards, observable human realities. Biology, even.
Absolutely. And the aha moment we're hoping you'll have is this connection. We're going to connect specific events, documented killings from 7th century Medina, right from the canonical texts.
Like Ibn Ishaq and Al-Tabari.
The foundational ones. And we'll draw a straight line from those events to the persecution of thinkers and activists today. And then we'll see how the bedrock of human morality, far from needing a divine command, is actually much more stable than most of us are led to believe.
It's a story about the danger of words, but also the power of reason.
And that history isn't just background noise. It's the legal and social precedent that fuels everything happening now. To get why New Shoes' work is so critical, we have to start there, with the pattern built on the fear of words.
Let's start at the beginning then. In a place called Yathrib, around 622 CE, New Shoes describes it as this vibrant, almost chaotic marketplace of voices. What did that actually look like?
Well, you have to picture a place that was multi-ethnic, multi-religious, a place where, debate was just the norm. And poets. Poets were not just entertainers.
They were more than that.
Oh, much more. They were the record keepers, the political commentators, the propagandists. A poet could stand up in the market and just, completely demolish a rival's reputation with a few lines of verse.
And the worst that would happen is what? A bad review.
Maybe a rotten date thrown at them. But that was the culture. It was built on open argument, on satire. Even when Muhammad and his followers arrived from Mecca, it took days of arguments between the tribes to hash out a covenant. Speech was central.
So competitive speech was the norm. Criticism was part of the political game. What was the single event that flipped the switch, that made words a capital crime?
It's pinned down to one specific moment, the Battle of Badr in March 624 CE.
Okay.
Muhammad leads about 300 men in a raid against a much larger force from Mecca, and they win. They win a spectacular, improbable victory.
And how they won is key. Right.
It's everything. The prevailing narrative, the one that gets preserved in the foundational texts, is that it wasn't just good tactics, it was divine intervention. Angels fought on their side.
So they return to Yathrib with more than just prisoners and spoils.
They return with proof, or what they see as undeniable proof, that their God is the winning God, that he fought for them directly. And that victory, that single event, it just radically changes the power dynamic in the city.
Which is when Yathrib becomes Medina.
Exactly. It's no longer just a place, Yathrib. It becomes Medina, which literally means the city. The implication is that it's the only city that matters now. The one true political and spiritual center.
And Nushuz points out that the revelations themselves, the verses of the Quran, they start to change in tone.
They shift dramatically. The earlier verses from Mecca often spoke of tolerance, of debate. After bed, the focus intensifies, it turns inward. Suddenly, the community is obsessed with identifying enemies within.
Hypocrites.
Hypocrites, yes. People who pay lip service but aren't true believers. The verses become about spreading corruption, about dissent, and about the severe punishments for those who cause it. That open marketplace of ideas, it suddenly seems very, very dangerous to the new leadership.
And this transition from satire to sanctioned murder was shockingly fast. Nushuz says the pattern begins just 2 weeks after Badr. How did it start?
It starts with a question, a very simple, chilling question that the prophet puts to his companions. Who will deal with this rascal for me?
Not a trial, not a debate, a delegation of violence.
An immediate delegation of violence and completely bypassing any kind of community process.
And the first victim was a man named Abu Afak. What was his crime?
His crime was poetry. He was an elderly Jewish poet. Some sources say he was over 100 years old. And he wrote verses questioning the battle. He basically asked, why all this killing? When did the refugee who came to us for protection become a warlord?
He was doing poets in that culture had always done. He was offering political commentary.
Exactly. Traditional political satire. But the response was anything but traditional.
No.
A man named Salim ibn Umayr volunteered. He went to Abu Afak's home at night and murdered him in his sleep. And Nushuz really hammers this point home. No trial, no counsel, no debate.
Just an assassination.
An assassination that was praised by the prophet the next morning. A simple, good job. And that single act, that applauded murder for words, that's the beginning of a pattern that has, as Nushuz argues, tragically persisted for 14 centuries.
But the killing didn't create total silence, at least not at first. Which brings us to the next case. Asma bint Marwan.
She was poetess and a mother of 5. And she was by all accounts morally outraged. Not just that an old man was killed for a poem, but that the men of her city, who were supposed to be the protectors of free expression, had just gone silent.
So she spoke up.
She did. Her verses circulated, and they were sharp. They condemned the hypocrisy, the fear that was taking over.
And the response was the same deadly question.
Precisely the same. When the prophet heard her words, he asked, who will rid me of Marwan's daughter?
More specific this time.
Very specific. And a man from her own tribe, Umayr ibn Adi, who was blind, volunteered. And the details here, which are preserved in the histories of Ibn Ishaq and al-Tabari, are just. They're crucial to understanding the weight of this precedent.
Let's pause on those sources because you mentioned them before. Why is it so significant that these accounts come from Ibn Ishaq and al-Tabari? What does that mean for a modern Muslim trying to reform the faith?
It's a critical point. These aren't obscure fringe texts that Nushuz is pulling from. Ibn Ishaq's Sirat Rasul Allah is one of the earliest, most foundational biographies of the Prophet Muhammad. It's where the story comes from.
The source code, in a way.
It's the source code. And al-Tabari, a few centuries later, compiled this massive authoritative history of the world. And he relied heavily on those early accounts. So when you cite them, you are citing the bedrock of historical understanding that is accepted by mainstream Islamic scholarship. These assassinations aren't footnotes. They're embedded in the core narrative.
Which makes the details of Asma's death all the more significant.
And all the more horrific. Umayr ibn Adi found her at night, sleeping with her children. She was nursing her youngest infant.
Oh, no.
And the account explicitly states that he pulled the baby off her breast before he ran his sword through her. The baby was still crying when he left.
I don't even have words for that.
And the next morning, Umayr's nervous. He asks the prophet if there will be repercussions, and the prophet assures him 2 goats won't put their heads together over her.
Meaning her death was so insignificant no one would dare object.
Her blood was worthless. And Nushuz includes these graphic details for a reason. They demonstrate that silencing dissent took absolute priority over any kind of universal human compassion, even for a nursing mother. The texts themselves record this, making it impossible for modern reformers to just wish it away.
The pattern then moves up the social ladder. The next target, Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf was a tribal chief, a big deal.
A very big deal. Half Arab, half Jewish, a man of influence and power. And because of that, his assassination required a new level of sophistication.
What was his crime?
Same as the others, really. Words. He publicly mourned the Meccans killed at Badr and wrote satirical verses about the Prophet. Again, standard practice for an Arab poet at the time. But because he was powerful and protected inside a fortress, a direct attack wasn't possible.
So it required planning. And as Nushu's highlights, it required deception.
Yes. This is a huge turning point. The Prophet asks, "Who will rid me of Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf?" A man named Muhammad bin Maslama volunteers, but he says we'll need to lie to him. And he is explicitly given permission to do so.
Permission to lie from the Prophet himself.
Explicitly. So Maslama goes to Ka'b and pretends to be disillusioned with Islam. He complains about the taxes, the demands. He gains Ka'b's trust. He fakes being a disgruntled follower.
So this is now sanctioned espionage for the purpose of political murder.
That's exactly what it is. Ka'b is lured out of his fortress at night under false pretenses, and he's ambushed and beheaded. And when the assassins bring his head back to the Prophet, he praises Allah.
So the lesson is clear. Words are capital crimes, and the state, if you will, is now using sophisticated methods, including sanctioned deception, to carry out the sentence.
That deception, that permission to lie, creates what Nushu calls a profound, unresolvable dilemma for modern reformers.
How so? Unpack that for us.
Well, if a modern progressive Muslim wants to argue that Islam is a religion that champions universal virtues like honesty, truthfulness, keeping your word, they run straight into the Ka'b incident. How do you square a universal prohibition on lying with the fact that the Prophet himself sanctioned it to facilitate a murder?
You can't.
You're stuck. You either have to admit that the Prophet approved of deception for political ends, which kind of undermines the whole moral purity argument, or you have to reject this foundational story as untrue, which undermines the authority of the entire tradition. It's a perfect trap.
It is. Now let's shift from criticism to outright rejection of the faith. The birth of apostasy as a capital crime. Nushi's focuses on a man named Abdullah ibn Sa'd.
Abdullah had a privileged position. He was one of the scribes writing down the Quranic revelations as the Prophet dictated them.
He was right there at the source.
Intimately close. And that intimacy is what led to his crisis of faith.
What was the specific moment?
It happened during the dictation of a chapter about human creation, what would become Quran 23.1214. As the Prophet is describing the stages of the embryo, Abdullah, sort of caught up in the poetry of it, exclaims his own thought out loud. He says, "Then blessed be Allah, the best of creators."
A beautiful line.
Very devotional line. But here's the moment it all changes. The Prophet pauses and then says, "Yes, write that down too. That's how it was revealed."
Oh, wow.
And in that instant, Abdullah sees his own human sentence, his own spontaneous thought, being absorbed directly into what was supposed to be the perfect, eternal word of God.
His realization wasn't that God didn't exist, but that the process was human, at least in part.
Exactly. He
Yep.
realized he had just contributed to the Quran, so he quietly leaves Islam, he goes to Mecca, and he starts telling people what he saw, that the scripture was man-made. This, of course, strikes at the very heart of its claim to infallibility.
And the consequence for this, for being the first to leave and say why, comes when Mecca is conquered in 630 CE.
Yes. When Mecca falls, a general amnesty is declared, but a very short death list is drawn up. It's mostly poets and singers who had mocked the Prophet. And right at the top of that list is Abdullah ibn Sa'd, the apostate scribe.
Was he killed?
No, he wasn't. But the way he was pardoned is what Nushu calls theater. His foster brother, Uthman, who would later be the third caliph, pleaded for his life. The Prophet remained silent for a very long, very uncomfortable time before finally granting the pardon.
But that's not the end of the story.
Not at all. The historian Al-Tabari records that after Abdullah left, Muhammad turned to his companions and said, "I kept silent so that one of you might get up and strike off his head."
That is just chilling. The intent was clear, even if the act didn't happen.
The intent was crystal clear. The message was sent to the entire community. Leaving the faith and criticizing the scripture's origins are capital offenses. The desire was for execution. This is the birth of apostasy as a capital crime.
Okay, finally, let's touch on the legal formalization of this. The story of the blind slave woman, which comes from a canonical hadith collection.
Right, this is where it gets locked into the legal framework. The Quran is the word of God, but the hadith, the sayings and actions of the Prophet, establish legal precedent. And this story is from Sunan Abu Dawud, a major collection.
What happened?
The story is stark. A blind, pregnant slave woman who who had borne her owner 2 children he adored, insulted the prophet. Her owner then confessed to murdering her by stabbing her through her pregnant belly.
Just for an insult.
Just for an insult. And the prophet's response becomes the legal ruling that solidifies this entire pattern. He declares, "Oh, be witness, no retaliation is payable for her blood."
Her blood was worthless. The murderer walks free.
Exactly. It establishes the legal precedent that insult can carry a death sentence, and the person who carries it out acts with impunity. This is the legal hammer that, Nishuz argues, is still being used today.
So, to sum up this first section, between 624 and 630 CE, this historical trap is built. You cannot criticize, you cannot insult, and you cannot leave. And it's all there in the foundational text sanctioned by the founder himself.
Which leaves modern progressive Muslims with an impossible choice. Either you defend these precedents and, by extension, justify the killing of critics today, or you reject these precedents, and in doing so, you undermine the authority of the prophet's example as it's recorded in your own holiest books. The trap is inescapable.
That historical context is so critical because now we can pivot and see how this isn't ancient history at all. This is contemporary policy. This pattern runs in a straight line from 7th century Medina right into the 21st century.
And Nishuz is emphatic about this. This isn't an anomaly. It's a recognized norm, and it's enforced in 2 ways: by official state laws and by unchecked mob violence. And often they feed into each other.
We see that so devastatingly in the case of Shama and Shahzad in Punjab, Pakistan in 2014.
This case is a direct modern echo of that worthless blood concept we just talked about. Shama and Shahzad were bonded laborers, basically modern slaves at a brick kiln.
Wow.
Shama, who was 4 months pregnant, was cleaning out her late father-in-law's things. She burned some trash, and in that trash were some papers that happened to have Quranic verses on them. She likely didn't even know.
But the economic context here is crucial, isn't it? This
Yeah.
wasn't just some spontaneous religious outrage.
Not at all. Nishuz highlights this very clearly. The kiln owner, a man named Yusuf Gujar, was exploiting them. They were trapped in debt. And Shama had started to question the accounting. She was pushing for their freedom.
So the blasphemy accusation was a tool.
It was a weapon. Gujar saw an opportunity to eliminate a problem. He used the rumor to turn the community against them.
And the local clerics got involved. The historical pattern clicks right into place.
Immediately, they used the mosque loudspeakers to announce that Shama and Shahzad were wajibul qatl, that it was a religious obligation to murder them.
And a mob formed.
A mob of over 1,000 people in less than half an hour.
The violence that followed it's just hard to even comprehend.
They were seized, they were stripped naked, paraded, beaten, and then they were thrown alive into the brick kiln furnace.
Thrown alive.
Post-mortem reports confirmed they were alive. The heat was so intense it cooked their lungs. Shama and her unborn child were burned to death.
And the legal consequences. They echo those historical precedents perfectly.
The pattern of worthless blood is unchanged. The kiln owner who started it all, Yusuf Gujar, was out on bail in 18 months. Out of over 100 people charged with participating in this premeditated public murder, 93 were acquitted.
93.
A handful got sentences, but the overwhelming majority walked free. The message from the state was clear. If the mob acts on a blasphemy charge, the victim's blood has no value, and there is minimal accountability.
And Nishuz make sure we understand this is a global threat. It's not just one country.
No, it's institutionalized. In 2024, 13 countries have the death penalty for apostasy on the books. Afghanistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Nigeria, the list goes on. And these laws draw their justification directly from those precedents set back in the 7th century.
And yet, despite this incredible risk, some people refuse to be silent. Nishuz talks about the choice of modern ex-Muslims to speak out.
It's an act of profound courage. Yeah. You know, the subreddit Rex Muslim has over 250,000 members. Most of them are anonymous, living in fear. But then you have people like Armin Navabi, Sarah Hayter, Abdullah Semeh, people who use their real names and faces despite constant death threats.
And Sharif Gaber, arrested in Egypt just last year for what? For disbelief?
Just for disbelief. And Nishuz frames the motivation for speaking out as a moral duty. It's a refusal to let these atrocities be forgotten. The quote is so powerful. We speak because Asma bint Marwan's 5 children grew up without her. We speak because the blind woman doesn't even have a name.
It's a refusal to be complicit through silence.
Exactly. 14 centuries is long enough.
That context of external risk, the constant threat of death, it's the perfect setup for Nishuz's internal crisis. Because you can't live in that world without questioning the entire moral system that allows it.
That's the pivot. The external horror forces the internal one. The psychological impact of losing your faith is one thing, but it's compounded when you realize you've also lost what you thought was your moral scaffolding.
And this whole crisis is just perfectly captured in one question from Nushuz's mother, asked just a few weeks after they left Islam. She asks, "If you don't believe in Allah, what's stopping you from becoming a monster?"
That one question, it contains the entire problem. The assumption is that God and morality are welded together. You can't have one without the other. So if you lose God, morality collapses, and you're left with what Nushuz calls existential vertigo.
Existential vertigo. That's a powerful phrase. What does that feel like?
It's the catastrophic loss of grounding. Imagine the ultimate police officer, the ultimate accountability system. The fear of hell is suddenly gone. The floor just vanishes from under you, and the first thing you feel is a terror of yourself.
A fear of what you might be capable of.
Exactly. If the only thing stopping me was a rule book backed by eternal punishment, what am I now? What's to stop me from stealing, from hurting people? It's a genuine fear that you might not have a good reason to be good anymore.
And this fear is really rooted in a philosophical idea called divine command theory.
Yes, divine command theory, or DCT, basically says that good is only what God commands. That's it. And action is good because God says so. If God forbids it, it's evil.
What's the trap in that?
The trap is that it makes morality completely arbitrary. If the only standard for goodness is the will of an all-powerful being, that being could command literally anything: torture, cruelty, murder, and by definition, it would become good. It's morality by decree, not by reason or empathy.
So Nushuz's midnight search was about finding a new bedrock for morality, one that couldn't just be commanded into or out of existence.
Precisely. And that search leads straight back to Plato, to the Euthyphro dilemma from over 2,000 years ago. Is something good because God commands it, or does God command it because it is inherently good?
And if it's inherently good,
then goodness exists outside of God. Morality is an objective thing that can be discovered. And that's where the search starts to connect philosophy with science. The idea that maybe goodness isn't a decree from the heavens, but something that evolved right here on Earth.
And that takes us right into the heart of this deep dive.
Exactly.
Nushuz, being a scientist, looks to biology, to ethology, the study of animal behavior, to figure this out. Is morality a divine gift, or is it an evolved capacity? Let's dig into the evidence here.
The evidence is really robust. It points to these innate moral foundations existing across a ton of social species. The consensus is that morality is basically a survival tool that helps complex groups cooperate.
Okay, so let's start with the famous experiment with the monkeys and fairness. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. It's often done with capuchin monkeys. You have two monkeys in separate cages side by side. You give monkey A a token and hands it back to the researcher, and it gets a piece of cucumber. It's happy. You do the same with monkey B, it gets a cucumber. Everyone's content.
Simple transaction.
Simple transaction. But then you change the reward. Monkey A does the task, gets a cucumber. But monkey B does the exact same task and gets a sweet grape. A much higher value reward.
And what does monkey A do?
It gets angry. It sees the unfairness. It takes the cucumber. Maybe it even throws it back at the researcher. It's demonstrating a sense of fairness, an aversion to being cheated. It will literally sacrifice a reward rather than accept an unjust deal.
And there's no scripture for monkeys.
No scripture, just an evolved sense of social contracts.
Okay, what about empathy? You mentioned elephants?
Elephants are fascinating. They have complex social lives. If a member of their herd dies, they'll perform what look like grief rituals, standing vigil, touching the bones. But for empathy, if a calf is distressed, maybe it's stuck in the mud, other adult elephants will rush over, touch it with their trunks, make these low, rumbling vocalizations that are known to be calming. They're actively trying to soothe another's distress. That's empathy in action. And then there are the rats. The idea that a rat would choose to free a trapped friend over getting a piece of chocolate. That sounds almost too good to be true.
It does sound like a parable, but it's been verified in labs. You have a free rat in a cage and a trapped companion in a little enclosure inside. The free rat also has access to chocolate, which they love.
And what does it do?
Overwhelmingly, the free rats first figure out the complex latch to free their companion before they go for the chocolate. They prioritize alleviating the distress of their friend over their own immediate gratification. That's cooperation, that's reciprocity, and it's outweighing basic self-interest.
So the conclusion becomes pretty undeniable. Morality isn't something that was handed down to us. It evolved.
It evolved because it works. Groups that cooperate, that show empathy, that enforce fairness, they simply outsurvive groups that are full of selfish, cruel individuals. These moral intuitions were selected for over millions of years.
And neuroscience shows us the wiring for it in our own brains.
We're literally built for it. You have things like the mirror neuron system. When you see someone get hurt, your brain simulates a shadow of that pain. That's the biological root of empathy. Our prefrontal cortex then weighs the consequences of our actions. Morality is physical. It's in our neurology.
Which also explains why, across cultures, people tend to agree on the big stuff.
Absolutely. The large-scale studies on this are clear. Whether you're religious or secular from Asia or America, people generally agree on the core principles. Don't harm innocent people, protect children, be fair.
So if morality was already there, what was religion's role?
Religion didn't create morality. It provided a powerful enforcement mechanism. It gave us rituals, community structure, and it solved the free rider problem.
The person who cheats when no one is looking.
Right. How do you stop that? In a big society, you introduce an all-seeing God who is always looking. And the consequences for cheating are eternal. Religion basically took our pre-existing moral instincts and scaled them up with a cosmic supervisor.
Now let's bring it back to the personal. The breakthrough moment for New Shoes. This wasn't just an academic exercise.
No, the real light bulb moment came from memory, from remembering times of internal conflict while they were still a devout believer. Specifically, recoiling at the age of 15 from the idea that apostasy deserves death.
So even while trying to be a good Muslim, their internal moral compass was rejecting a key part of the doctrine.
Exactly. The innate, evolved empathy that screams, it's wrong to kill someone for changing their mind, was stronger than the scriptural command they were trying to accept. That internal moral sense was actively fighting the religious framework.
Which is the ultimate proof that morality exists independently from it.
It's the proof. The conscience of the believer rejected the command of the God. New Shoes realized their whole life they had been making moral choices based on this internal compass, but they had just been incorrectly attributing it to God.
This leads to a really critical distinction New Shoes makes: the difference between genuine morality and religious obedience.
Hey there, thanks for being around. We are going to make a small break. I'm going to share with you my books. I have several books. So far, all my books about religion, atheism, which have been published a lot, they are in Portuguese, which is my main focus. But if you are interested, you can still buy my books to help me to support my work. I have several books. For example, one book that I'd like to recommend now is AI by Sci-Fi. AI by Sci-Fi is a book that talks about artificial intelligence, which is everyone is talking about artificial intelligence with ChatGPT, all this amazing stuff that they can do. They can talk, they can create video, they can create podcasts. This podcast, for example, there are several episodes that was recorded using artificial intelligence, which is amazing how I can do that. I can even interact as you could see in several episodes. So I would like to invite you to buy my book AI by Sci-Fi. It's available on Google Books, Google Play. It's also available on Amazon. So you can buy my book. If you are interested in something a little bit more complex, a little bit more technical, I do have as well technical book. For example, I have one book about computational thinking, in which I talk about Kasparov. It's a technical book. Greg Kasparov was the first guy to be beaten by a computer. He has a very nice book about that, how artificial intelligence overturned the difference between human and artificial intelligence. So please buy my book and offer me all the support. You can find all of them on Amazon. Hopefully, in the future, I'm going to write also about religion, atheism, and science. But I do have a podcast. I do have a blog called the Scientists Free from Religion. The same name of the podcast. And you can find several already publications about several topics in which talk about science, religion, and atheism. So, hope you enjoyed the show. So, let's come back to the show.
It all comes down to motivation. New Shoes lays it out clearly. Religious obedience is fear-based. It's self-interested. You pray because you're scared of hell. You fast to avoid punishment. You wear a certain thing to prevent tempting someone else. All of it is about managing your personal cosmic risk.
And genuine morality.
That's empathy-based. It's focused outward on the well-being of others. You share your food because you know hunger hurts. You defend someone being bullied because humiliation is a real pain. You tell the truth because trust is vital for human relationships.
So morality is about the suffering of others. Obedience is about you.
That's the core insight. Fearing punishment isn't morality, it's self-preservation. And as those historical examples show, pure obedience is what can make good people do monstrous things. When the command from God overrides your empathy, your human moral system breaks.
This brings us to the final, and maybe the most powerful, section of the argument. The 3 specific ways Nushuz argues that secular ethics isn't just an alternative, but is actually a superior foundation.
The first point is the most direct.
Yeah.
It's that secular ethics is genuinely moral.
Because it purifies the motivation.
Exactly. You take away the cosmic carrot and stick heaven and hell, and you're left with the real reason to be good. You do it for its own sake.
So the person who doesn't murder because they fear God isn't really moral, they're just cautious.
They're risk-averse. They're self-interested. But the person who doesn't murder because they fundamentally value human life and understand the suffering it would cause, that person is truly moral. And if they lose their belief in God tomorrow, they're still not going to murder anyone, because their morality is rooted in reality, not reward.
Let's apply that to something like charity.
A great example. A religious person might give to charity with the motivation of getting a tenfold reward in the afterlife. It's a kind of spiritual investment. It's transactional. A secular person gives to charity motivated by the immediate, verifiable reduction of suffering in another human being. There's no expectation of cosmic payback. It's non-transactional, and therefore it's a more pure form of altruism.
Okay, the second point is huge for human progress. Secular ethics can admit mistakes and evolve.
This is the absolute game changer. Religious moral systems claim to be divine and perfect. That's their biggest weakness. It makes them rigid. If a text from the 7th century says something, who are you to question it? You must simply submit.
So our understanding of the world grows, but the text is frozen.
Exactly. Our understanding of human dignity, of psychology, of rights, it all evolves. But the text is stuck, reflecting the moral norms of 7th century Arabia.
And Nushuz points to major moral progress that happened in opposition to religious doctrine, like the abolition of slavery.
We have to detail this. Slavery was permitted, it was regulated, it was normalized in many of the world's holy books. When the abolitionists in the 18th and 19th centuries argued against it, their best arguments weren't theological, they were secular. They were about universal human dignity, about shared consciousness. They had to appeal to a moral law higher than the written scripture to win.
It was a victory for human reason over divine decree.
Precisely. And we see that chasm so clearly with other issues. Nushuz uses the example of child marriage, specifically the documented marriage of a 9-year-old girl to a 53-year-old man.
Which was accepted then.
Accepted and recorded. But today, we universally condemn it. What changed? Not the text.
Our understanding changed.
Our scientific and moral understanding changed. We learned about child development, psychology, consent, trauma. It was evidence from science that proved the profound, verifiable harm of that practice. Secular ethics can look at that new evidence and say, we were wrong. This causes suffering. We must change.
So moral progress isn't moral relativism. It's not anything goes.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's saying the core principle, reduce harm and promote flourishing, is constant. But our application of that principle gets better as our knowledge gets better. Secular ethics lets us use all the tools we have, reason, empathy, science, to apply that principle, freeing us from the limitations of a 1,400-year-old text.
And the third superiority Nushuz identifies is that secular ethics requires you to think.
Divine command theory is, well, it's intellectually lazy. The answer to every complex moral problem is because God said so. That's the end of the discussion. It demands obedience, not thought.
Whereas secular ethics demands you own your choices.
It forces engagement. It makes you use frameworks like consequentialism, where you judge an action by its results. You're forced to ask the hard questions. Will this policy actually reduce suffering in the real world? What are the unintended consequences?
So instead of just following a rule, you have to be accountable for the outcome.
You have to use evidence. You have to weigh trade-offs. It moves you from asking, am I following the rules, to asking, am I actually making the world a better or less painful place? That intellectual accountability is what was missing from the dogma.
So the new compass that New Shoes found rests on these three pillars that survived the loss of faith.
Right. Empathy, which is our biological wiring to recognize the suffering of others. Consequentialism, which is the rational method for reducing that suffering. And the golden rule, the simple, powerful recognition that other people are just as real as you are, a principle that predates every single holy book.
And this leads to an unexpected kind of freedom.
It really does. Without the constant anxiety about divine judgment, you're free to do good for its own sake. Without the certainty of a fixed text, you're forced to engage with complexity, which makes you a more thoughtful and compassionate person. The moral circle actually gets bigger because it's no longer about your tribe versus theirs. It's about all conscious beings.
And that final, beautiful answer New Shoes offers to their mother's question just brings it all home. How do I stop myself from becoming a monster?
The same way you do, Mom, by caring about suffering, using reason, and recognizing our shared humanity. I can also admit when I'm wrong, change my mind with new evidence, and do good for its own sake, not because I'm watched, but because it matters.
So what does this all mean? Our deep dive today has shown this incredible dual reality. On one side, you have a pattern of capital punishment for words that has been tragically preserved for 1,400 years, creating real danger for thinkers like New Shoes today.
And on the other, you have the human mind finding a stronger, more adaptable, and ultimately more humane moral foundation once that scaffolding of dogma is removed.
So the key takeaways are now really clear. First, that pattern of silencing critics, of killing poets and apostates, was established in the Prophet Muhammad's lifetime. It's recorded in the canonical texts, and it creates this profound, unresolvable dilemma for modern reformers.
Second, morality is an evolved, innate human capacity. It's rooted in our biology, and it actually thrives when you replace fear-based obedience with reason and a genuine focus on reducing real-world suffering.
And finally, secular ethics gives us the priceless freedom of moral progress. It lets our understanding of dignity and autonomy evolve with new knowledge, allowing us to move past the rigid and morally limiting norms that were frozen in time.
And that adaptability, that's not a weakness. It's the very definition of intellectual and moral strength. It's a system that can heal itself.
If you want to get deeper into New Shoes' work, you should definitely check out the publication Scientists Free from Religion, which is focused on exactly this kind of rational, evidence-based thinking. And New Shoes will actually be live with us on our YouTube channel this coming Thursday, December 11th, so check the link in the description to see the time in your part of the world.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. If the moral progress we cherish, the rejection of slavery, of child marriage, of overt gender discrimination, if all of that was achieved by questioning dogma and expanding our circle of compassion, what deeply held, maybe even religiously justified belief that we hold today will future generations look back on and condemn as a massive moral failure? What are we defending right now that fails that ultimate test of reducing suffering and promoting human flourishing?
Hey there, you arrived to the end of this episode. You can always check out my YouTube channel and also keep watching because there are 7 episodes. So you just if you enjoyed this one, hopefully you are going to enjoy the next one. I always like to remember that you can support my work by buying my books. Even though I still don't have a book about religion, which is the main topic of the podcast, I do have a book about artificial intelligence, and also I have a blog called Scientists Free from Religion on Medium, and there are several blog posts there, and you can enjoy it, you can read it, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, you can share it with your friends. So hopefully I can hear from you, and hope you had an amazing time. So hope to see you in the next episode.